Good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Allen. I'm joined by my usual partner, Tom Laidlaw, who played 11 seasons in the National Hockey League with the New York Rangers and Los Angeles Kings. This is the Laidlaw and Allen Report. We come to you twice a week to talk all things hockey and a few other things, including cooking and missing bunnies. And before the show, Tom and I theorized that my son's bunny, who went missing for 24 hours, that maybe it involved alien abduction. Yeah.
I think they got him up there, did some studies on him, and they figured, well, these earthlings aren't too smart, so we'll put a white rabbit in its place, thinking that nobody would notice. And then once they're done with the rabbit experiments, and they put him back and took the white rabbit back.
Well, that's as good a theory as anyone in my family has. But anyway, I'm out of Chicago, and I'm back in my home. We stopped at my lake house because we had storms here, and we had lost power, so we had to double check that, make sure that power was restored, so we didn't have any issues. So, but we did. So now I'm back in my regular home, but the inmates are running the asylum here. I have all 5 grandchildren in this house.
Oh, nice! You got 5 of them in the house. There you go.
Yeah, 5 in the house plus one of their friends. So we have 6 children under the age of 10, and 3 of them under 5. So we're ready to go. So
maybe if we have a little extra time, maybe we can interview, get them all on the show.
Yeah, that's for sure. All right, but let's start off with the Stanley Cup final news. The word coming out of the media scrums is no Nazem Kadri for the game 1, which I think is pretty important news. Kadri has had an incredible season.
Yep.
I don't think that changes, the line or anything in terms of whether or not the Colorado's still going to be favored, I think, by the majority of people, although you and I think it's Tampa.
Yeah.
But,
so. That kind of amazes me, especially with the goaltending situation there. That's
less. Well, the betting favorite reflects the action that's being laid on the bet. So I mean, the fact that Colorado's favored means that people are betting on Colorado. So and I think the general public, they don't look at it quite the same we do, the way we do. So but it'll be interesting. But it's, to me, if Braden Point is playing and Kadri is not playing, now all of a sudden that's just another point in Tampa Bay's favor. And Kemper is playing, but I don't think that rises.
They haven't named him as a starter yet. They haven't named him as a starter. He's available.
No, right? Yeah, he's available now because Frank Gore played pretty well. So so it'll be.
I'd like to go back. I don't know if they did it back when the Islanders were winning their cup. I'd like to go back and see in their run when they won 4 in a row, how many times where people were betting against them, waiting for other teams to win. I wonder about that because
there wasn't really betting. Now. The thing about betting, I find it amazing that people, are saying, oh, there's just so much betting news. But, we just kind of use that now as an indicator. It's the same thing with advanced stats. Like, it's just another way to say, hey, who do people think is going to win? And, it reflects not so much, the experts. I guess the early line, the original line, is through the betting experts, so they're anticipating what's going to happen. Right. But it's just a way to reflect. Okay, the general population thinks Colorado's going to win. That's all it is, really.
Yeah, I agree. There's so many things to me. Like Bednar, I like what he's done with the team as a coach in Colorado. It's just he's never been there before either, and it's a whole different animal, right? I mean, the pressure on you there, and Cooper's been there. Some of the changes, the adjustments he made in the Rangers series really made a difference. I felt so.
I did a story yesterday where I talked about and sort of ranked the Conn Smythe trophy candidates so far, and I just mentioned in there, not that I was advocating for this whatsoever, but I do think it's an interesting discussion about the fact that Connor McDavid technically is eligible. To be considered. And, he is the leading scorer in the tournament and was really a dominant player. I mean, you could certainly say he's deserving of being talked about. But saying that, he wasn't in my top 5. And so, but I just because I sort of respect the idea that even though technically he's eligible, we all tend to think, you got to play 4 rounds in order to win the MVP.
Right.
But
I guess in theory, I agree with you 100%. In theory, you could say guy could play one game. I guess I'm exaggerating here. Play one great game, get hurt, and then. Hey, I know we're bouncing around a little bit, but Susan Brooks put something up there. I know we want to touch on this anyways. What's your feeling?
I want to weigh in on that. Let's wrap up the Stanley Cup and then go over to coaches because we'll spend some time on that. But anyway, I just wanted to get your thought on my 5 guys. Like number 1, I thought has to be Cale Makar. Cale Makar has just been so dominant. And, if there's one guy that I saw in the first 3 rounds that was a difference maker in every game he played, it was him.
Well, and both ends of the ice, too, shutting down
McDavid,
shutting down McDavid,
he shut him down, although McDavid got 3 points in 2 of the 4 games and 1 in another. But in one game, he didn't get a point. So, that's essence. But Makar, you're right, both ends of the ice. Both ends of the ice. So I had him number 1, Vasilevsky number 2. And what's interesting about Vasilevsky is in the last 11 games that he's played now, 1 or 0 goals in 8 of those 11.
Yeah,
that's remarkable. Yeah. They're playing good teams, and think about the teams that Tampa has already beaten to get here. All 100+ point teams.
Yep. Rangers were powerful. The power play for the Rangers was unbelievable all season long.
Yeah. They've beaten really, really, really good teams. And in the last 11 games, he's won, given up 1 or fewer goals in 8 of those games. Wow. Now he had some games where they lit him up too. I mean, one game he gave up 6 in that game, as I recall. Right. But anyway, so I got him number 2. And then you run into, I think it's almost insulting for me to have Nathan MacKinnon listed number 3 because he has 11 goals in 14 games in the postseason. And here's, I was thinking about this when I was writing this, but we've always sort of undervalued goals in comparison to assists. Like when we're determining the point champion, we say a goal is equal to an assist, even though some of those assists are secondary assists. No. And we've all seen, like, I think everybody thinks that it's got to be a direct passing play to get an assist,
right?
But it doesn't. Like we've seen, 2 assists. I mean, it's almost like they try to give 2 assists on every goal,
right? Well, like a goalie can touch the puck, give it to a defenseman. The defenseman can carry it all the way down the ice, pass to somebody else who scores, and that goalie gets an assist.
Yeah. So it's so goals to me are just more valuable. It's almost like, and I think they do in some leagues, 2 for a 2.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So anyway, the fact that Nathan MacKinnon has 11 goals in 14 games like that, he's playing well. I don't think there's any other way to determine that.
The eye test too. When you watch him play, he's a dominant, powerful player. Man, he's
So I mean, it wouldn't take much for me to say Nathan MacKinnon is now the favorite. Like if he came in and they won the first game 4-1 and he had a hat trick, I might say he's the favorite now. So he's pretty impressive, Nathan MacKinnon. I don't want to shortchange Makar, but I also don't want to shortchange MacKinnon as well. And now Kucherov, and this is there's a stat that the league put out there, and I think this is a remarkable stat. See what you think. So only 3 players in NHL history have had 3 consecutive playoffs where they've had 25 or more points. It is Wayne Gretzky, it is Brian Trottier, and Mike Bossy. That is a pretty exclusive club.
Yeah.
And now Nikita Kucherov needs just 2 points, and he'll join that list.
Yeah, you know what I like about him too? As the games have gotten more important, he's gotten better too. Right? He's really stepped up. And not unlike those other players. Brian Trottier was the same way too. As the playoffs went on, he got better and better all the time. So,
Yeah. And then the fifth guy, and I think this is really fascinating to me, and I looked up to see if I was right. Now, I mean, you can quibble because it's not all about points, and I certainly understand that.
Mm-hmm.
But statistically speaking, this will be Steven Stamkos' best playoff run.
Yeah.
So for that reason, he's fifth on my thing. And I think that's, I think they really needed him this year because Braden Point, has been injured. Their depth has been eroded. So for him to rise up, and you talk about that all the time. I mean, one of the reasons why I think you have disliked Jack Eichel and Duchesne is they haven't risen up when their team really needed them.
Absolutely.
In your mind. So I think Steven Stamkos, the reason he's on my list is that he has stepped up during a time when he was really, really needed. So
I really can't argue with Stamkos. I guess the 5B would maybe be Hedman for me, but
although here's the thing about Hedman. I just had a conversation. I shouldn't say just. It was like 3 days ago, but with a general manager who said, "Is it just me, or has Hedman not been as good as he's been in the past?" And I had to think about it because you always notice him, but we've seen him really be dominant. And I think it is fair what the guy was saying. Like, he hasn't been as dominant as he's been in the past, but maybe that's by design a little bit.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, and plus I don't think he has to be as dominant there. McDonough, who was there before, when they've won cups as well, but McDonough's playing well too. So it's really not like Hedman has to be out there for, 40 minutes or something like that. They've got other guys that can play. That whole left side too, the Russian kid, what's his name? He's good as well. So and Hedman's getting older. So, they know they're
Sergachev, you're talking about Yeah. Well, I guess what I would say about Hedman, because I did consider putting Hedman on my list. I used to say in the press box, members of the media pick the 3 stars, and it goes on a rotation, and sometimes that isn't as easy as you think, because in some games there's not a lot of scoring, and in some games, it's just especially in recent years when the scoring has been down, it's been sort of a tug of war in the middle of the ice and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes guys struggle a little bit, especially for the third guy. And what I used to tell people, I said, when you're in this Detroit press box and you're watching Detroit play, you can almost count on Nick Lidstrom was one of the 3 best players on the ice. Yeah. And that's how I feel about Hedman. He's always one of the best players on the ice.
That's a very good point. Yeah, I agree. And that is, I never thought, because when I'm watching a game, I'm not really watching which individual player is playing great. If some guy stands out, then you see it. But I'm not really saying, okay,
I mean, and sometimes it is fairly obvious, or, you notice, like, if a guy blocks 6 shots in a row, or, there's things that just stick out in the game. But there are games when, you might, if it's a 1-0 game, it's usually your 2 goalies, and
that's Susan. She's an intelligent woman.
Yeah, don't get them started, Susan. You'll just, because all I have to do is, and I have actually done it, pointed out that Tom Laidlaw once tried to argue that the Lightning were better off without Victor Hedman, so it leaves everybody scratching their heads. But. I understand, and just for people to understand, I understood what Tom was saying. Players rise up when others are out, but you can never, ever make a case that a team is better off without its star player, so it's just simply not true.
I could try.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, and you do. You did. As a matter of fact, you did try that. But anyway, let's get to Susan's, because this is really the main focus. But I wanted to take care of that Stanley Cup stuff, because I want to pretend we're like football, and that our Super Bowl is our Super Bowl. Right. I think if we want to be a big sport, we have to act like a big sport. Okay. All right. That's how I feel about it. For some reason, that's not the way it works in our sport. We don't build to a crescendo. We don't get to the Stanley Cup final and everybody's still engaged because they want to know who's going to win. If your team is out, I'm guessing we won't have many New York Rangers fans tuned in there. So anyway, I like to pretend it's a big event.
So everybody in the country is watching. Everybody wants to see the commercials, everything, right? Okay.
Well, I wouldn't say that, but I want to believe that there are people who care who the champion of the NHL is. So.
Okay, I'm in there.
Anyway,
I've got it.
But as a journalist, I would say the bigger story is the coaching market. And looks like we had a big strike last night, although it's been confirmed by reporters, but we have not had the team release the news that Bruce Cassidy is going to be the head coach of the Vegas Golden Knights. Thoughts, Tom, on that hiring?
Well, a little birdie tells me, obviously, you know what a fan I am of Gerard Gallant, the Rangers' new coach, and was fired, obviously, by Vegas as his last stop. And a little birdie, I did a little research on why, because they fired him. They felt that his defensive system, they couldn't win with. So I guess then they're saying that Cassidy is the guy that is a guy that's got a system that will work there. Or that's obviously they chose him. They chose him right away. I mean, he wasn't on the market that long. Listen, I guess he's a good coach. He doesn't, again, like when I look at the top three coaches in the league for me are Gallant, Brindamore, and Berube in St. Louis. Those are the guys to me that get the most out of their players, that I feel get the most out of players. Now, Tortorella was in that category as well. Obviously, he kind of wears people down a little bit. And the rumor is that he's going to sign Philadelphia. So again, I'm not negative towards Cassidy, but I don't look at him as one of those guys that he's going to come in there and make a difference. You know my feeling that lineup. They have to obviously do some things there to get under the cap for this coming season. I just question the makeup of that team, not unlike the makeup of the team in Nashville that I questioned before. So I guess if he goes in there and they do well, I mean, to me it's a tough job. There's a lot of strong personalities in that locker room. Again, my feelings about Eichel and just the appearance of how he doesn't rise up and make the rest of the team better. So I'm not against the hiring, but I was never really a big fan. Like I never thought, well, geez, he's making a difference in Boston. I just thought Boston had that aura that they'd already built, the culture that they'd already built. They had players there before. So I don't think he made that big of a difference. But again, I don't think it's a bad hire either.
Well, you and I are in disagreement on this. I think he is a terrific coach. And you and I actually even talked about this, even though, we agree that there is almost something tribal in Boston about pass down. But I think the perception around the league is the Bruins overachieved this season. They were kind of, beat up. They had some issues going on all season long. They had a new goaltender. The goaltender had retired, and yet there they were, getting it done day in and day out. They had COVID issues as well. I think he's a good coach. I do, and I think
I'm not necessarily saying you're wrong, but what makes you think he's a good coach? Like you think
I think he gets a lot out of his team defensively. That I think he was hired because they know that the Bruins' tradition is defense, and Cassidy plays defense. They were fourth in the league in goals against average with a rookie goalie and an unproven goalie. Now,
well, it appears that Vegas agrees with you because again, I'm being told that they fired Gallant because they didn't like his defensive system. So then they right away hired Cassidy. Then they believe.
Yeah, but what I don't understand about your Gallant thing is he hasn't been their coach in a while. DeBoer's been their coach.
Yeah, I know, but I guess I'm looking at the reason I bring that up is if that's what they saw that they thought they were missing, they must believe that Cassidy has what you're saying, that defensive.
Yeah, well, I think we're a coach removed from that, so I don't know that you hire a coach based on who your coach 2 years ago was because DeBoer.
No, I'm not comparing him to Gallant. What I'm saying, the management felt that's what they wanted.
Yeah, but DeBoer is a defensive coach. DeBoer is a defensive coach.
Well, I'm questioning what Kelly McCrimmon's doing there. I mean,
yeah. But anyway, I do think he'll do a nice job there. You
think they'll make the playoffs next year then?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. They're going to they have some work to do there. They'll trade Dadonov again for a second time. But they're going to have to move someone else because I think they want to keep Riley Smith. So they're going to have to do that, and they're going to have to make a decision about their goaltending.
Well, that's the next thing. I guess Pete DeBoer has gotten fired now, so that somewhat alleviates that problem.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, you could just kind of go on the way you have it. They like Logan Thompson, I know quite a bit, and to be honest with you, I was kind of impressed by him too. Mm-hmm. So they don't really have to do anything. They could just say Robin Leonard has played well for them in spurts.
Right. And it's relatively speaking, it's not a huge contract. He's got 3 years left at $5 million a year. Is that what it is?
Yeah. And, $5 million for a starting goalie is quite reasonable.
Yeah,
So they don't really have to do anything, but because really they're only going to be spending I think Thompson's at still entry level, isn't he?
Yeah, I think he is. Yes.
Yeah. So you're spending $6 million for starting goaltending. So that isn't their problem.
Yeah.
So, if they're satisfied that's good, and, you could make that that's certainly better than the Edmonton Oilers situation.
Yeah,
so,
no kidding.
yeah. So, they're good there. And, people, even though Markstrom has been a good goalie for them, people were disappointed in his postseason performance.
Yeah.
So maybe, Vegas is okay, but, they're still got problems. Now they're going to be able to move Brisson into the lineup, and he'll be an entry level contract, and he's a good quality player, so he'll move in.
But Pacioretty's name has been mentioned about getting traded too, right? Pacioretty.
Yeah, he's one of the guys that and that clears up a lot of cap for them. He's $7 million, I think, and so that would clean up, and that would give them some room. But they're not the only team with cap issues.
Yes.
Even on this Stanley Cup final team, they don't have any room to sign Andre Palat. Like they're already in trouble for next year.
That's a good point. Like, where does a Pacioretty go? What's he making? $7 or $8 million a year, something like that?
77. I think 7.
Okay.
Well, I mean, there's teams that could certainly fit.
Well, I mean, teams like Detroit and everything, right? I mean,
they could, but it doesn't fit for what Eisenman's trying to do.
Right.
But they certainly he certainly could find some reasons to, or some teams to take him, and he would certainly be a good fit for Nashville.
But Nashville doesn't have the cap space, do they?
Oh yeah.
Well, don't they want to get what's his name?
It depends on whether they get Forsberg or not.
Yeah, right. I just see him signing there. I don't know. I mean, it seems like a place you want to play. I just think
I'm with you on that. I mean, I think, and the thing about it is, though, that's bothersome to me is, both sides now know exactly where this deal can be done. I mean, they've been at it a long time. So it's like they know what his position is. He knows what their position is. They're playing chicken, essentially. So, and I think that's dangerous because who is this team if they don't have Peter Forsberg?
Well, yeah, and he could get to the point he gets upset that they're playing chicken. They said, like, why don't you just get me signed? If I'm that important to the team, why don't you just sign me? And he ultimately says, listen, I don't care what the numbers are. I'm just not coming back. You're going to treat me like that. I'm not playing here. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he could just say, let's start the moving process right now. I'll put my house for sale. I'll just kind of move on. Yeah, it's dangerous. It's dangerous.
Yeah. It kind of tells you there's no noise, although it's in Nashville, right? It's not like it's Toronto or New York or Montreal or something like that. So it's in Nashville, so it's not that big a story. But you don't hear any noise about him. Like if I was his agent, I would be making sure it's out there that if he really wanted to stay, I would be making sure it's out there that, listen, you're upsetting the player. He may not come back and sign here. Nothing that's happening, right? So,
right.
Just real quick, I thought it was an interesting story here. The Rangers hired this Jessica Campbell to coach in their prospect camp, first female coach. So that's pretty cool. Yeah,
that is cool. Yeah. Like that. I mean, you're really starting to see that opening up now. Yeah. You're starting to see women getting, interviews and serious jobs. The Vancouver Canucks have a female assistant general manager, and we've got some director of player development in New Jersey. And Wickenheiser has been in Toronto for a while now as well. So it's starting to cross gender barriers.
So the Rangers signed Kravtsov. They had some problems with him before, and he went back to Russia, I believe, to play. Now they signed him.
What's interesting about that is I just assumed that he was signing the deal to make it easier to trade him,
right?
Because people want some cost certainty, kind of what Boston did with DeBrusk. But then I read that Drury said he wants to come play, and he's going to play with the Rangers. So. I mean, that's a better deal because from what I heard, the Rangers didn't get overwhelming offers for him.
Right.
So, I mean, people were interested in him, but it wasn't like they wanted to. Like, he's a first round pick,
Yeah.
and nobody was offering that for.
And it's just a 1-year contract he signed, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, why not bring him back? Let's see what he can do. So,
sure.
And what about what happens with Campbell now?
Well, more and more I thought maybe something was up, but more and more when I hear Gallant talk and I talk to other people, I think it was just more they made the decision, particularly because Strone and who else was hurt. They weren't sure how much they were going to be able to play. So they wanted to make sure they had other centermen in the lineup. And that means if they're going to have these extra people, Campbell was the odd man out. And like the last 2 or 3 games that he did play, he just really he didn't do much. So I think it was kind of a decision. Okay, well, listen, this is do or die for us. They wanted Strowman in the lineup. He wanted to play, although they knew he was hurt really bad. He has some spine or something like that. So it was more that we need to have other sentiment in case these guys can't play their game. Capo, you're the man out, odd man out. And they just felt like it wasn't that much of a loss because he really wasn't doing anything. So, like, even when that kid line was together and he was on the kid line, he really wasn't. It was Lafreniere and Hedl that were really playing great. Capo was all right, but he had a couple of chances. Like there in the Carolina series, he missed an empty net. Would have made a big difference. I think it was in game 1 or whatever. So he really didn't do much. He wasn't bad, but I just didn't think he did a lot. Yeah, Rooney was the other player that was in the lineup. They brought in the lineup in case those guys got hurt. So thanks, Susan.
Yeah, what was interesting to me about on the social media discussion, and it's interesting. So social media discussions can go right in the sewer, or you could have intelligent discussions. And there was a lot of discussion about because the kid line, everybody was talking about that, and there was a lot of positive vibes about that kid line. Yep. But there was a discussion, and I found it interesting because I either I had misread the tea leaves or they were one or the other. And it's possible that I was, because I certainly wasn't there. But they said that, they sensed all along that Gallant, that some of the Ranger fans were saying that Gallant wasn't as happy with the kid line as the fan base was. That in the game, and they thought, just as you said, that maybe Campbell it wasn't pulling its weight in his weight in the thing.
I think that's accurate to say, and that because it was really he was happy with the play of Lafreniere and particularly Hedl.
Yes.
Lafreniere played better too.
Yeah. That hit the perceived strength of that line was a lot of Lafreniere. So
definitely. And Hedl too. Hedl had some games there where
I thought he was terrific. Yeah, for sure.
So I think they're somewhat right. Okay, the line played well when they did together, but it was because of those two guys. So when he broke up that line and put them in different places, it was more because those two guys in particular deserved to be up higher in the lineup. So,
well, it is interesting to me, and I've always noted this through the years. You're watching a game from the analytical perspective when you're in the media, but not the same way a coach does.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're watching a line and they're really going, and so then you ask a question after the game about that line and how well it was going, and you're always surprised when the coach says, "I didn't quite see it that way." He doesn't phrase it like that.
Yeah.
But there was somebody on that line that he wanted more out of, or there was someone on that line that made a mistake that he thought was criminal, for the lack of.
And that is the truth. So when you coach the players for a period of time, you get to know them. There's certain triggers you look at that say, okay, I know he's in the game, or I know he's not in the game.
Right. So it is certainly does happen. So, well, and like we always tend to we being the media, the fan base, so forth, overblow these kinds of issues. Like this is not the first time a young player, was removed from the lineup because the coach thought he could play better. So
right, yeah, totally. Here's an interesting idea here. Most coaches are in love with the vets. You know what? I think most coaches are in love with the guys that help them win hockey games. I think. I don't care I don't think it matters if they're vets or like a young player can play with some maturity. I remember when Charlie McAvoy first came up with the Boston Bruins, man, he played with maturity. And I don't think they didn't care whether he was a young player or old player. They cared about the way he played. So same thing. I mean, it's Adam Fox is the same way. He's somewhat of a veteran, but
I think I tend to agree with our viewer though. Especially, and the other thing, I'd go a point further and say that general managers are in love with their veterans. Like there's a romance between GMs and their players. They have a hard time saying goodbye to them. They keep them around, and a lot of it. Some of it isn't tied to their performance on the ice. I had a conversation with the general manager when he was talking about, re-signing veteran players. And he said, when I'm re-signing those veteran players, sometimes it crosses my mind that, I'm not going to get a call at 2:00 in the morning saying the police pulled over this guy. They want guys that they can trust who are going to be good model citizens.
That's true.
So,
that is true.
And how many GMs have said to you, you got to not fall in love with your players because at some point you're going to have to, move them out. And I think people do. And you know what? It's human nature. Yeah. If you get to
we're redeemed as not being ready. I put that up there because I'll let you finish, Kevin. But that's an interesting. So that's one of the things that I took great pride in. Right. I mean this very truthfully when I say it. I really wasn't that good of a player. But I had to be ready for every game. I was a captain, assistant captain, players, player award, all those things. And I did that for, like when I had Herb was just counting on me always being ready. Herb Brooks coaching. Then when Ted Sater came in, at first everything was great. But then I got hurt. I hurt my back and everything. And I'll never forget one scene in the locker room, a practice rink up in Rye, where I don't even know if it was a real letter, but he said it was a letter from a fan that was just ripping into me because of the way I stood during the national anthem. I stood with my head down and I should have had my head up. And he read this letter Ted did in front of the whole team. Now, I don't know if it was an actual letter or he made the letter up, but he was finding a reason to get basically saying I wasn't ready for the game because I had my head down. And I was mad. That was
wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's I hadn't heard that story before. So that's pretty dramatic. Yeah. Well, the thing about it is that whole concept of not being ready. I've always been troubled by that a little bit, just because like I've seen guys that seemed like they were all fired up, and then they make a couple of mistakes, and people say they weren't ready. I mean, were they really not ready, or did they just make mistakes?
Yeah, you have a bad game sometimes. You have a bad game.
Yeah, and especially one of the common themes, especially in the NHL, is we didn't start on time. That's one of my favorites. Yeah, we didn't start. The game was at 7:30, and we didn't get going till late. I mean, we didn't know what time the game started.
Right. I remember John Muckler was quoted as saying, I believe it was John Muckler was quoted as saying that if you can get your team to play their best 75% of the time, you've done a good job as a coach. Yeah. It's just some nights it's an off night. It's just it doesn't work. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I remember when the use of the phrase biorhythms first started, and we all did stories on that and all that kind of thing. I just on sometimes your team, everybody's all together playing well, and it's momentum. It's that thing that you can't really describe, where you find your momentum early and it just carries you through. Right. And there's really no explanation for it.
As much as it shouldn't happen, confidence is such a huge thing. I hear people say sometimes, "Oh, you're making $5 million a year. How can you not be confident?" Well, the money's got nothing to do with it. It's just, sometimes you just lose your confidence for whatever reason.
Yeah. If you're in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup final and you're 5 minutes into the first period, it never occurs to you how much money is in your bank account or what you're earning. Like that has nothing to do with it. Well, the other thing that too is, and it just drives me nuts, and that's what's wrong with social media. A guy makes a mistake, and immediately, what a moron. That's the favorite thing.
You told me this before that.
Like, what a moron. Yeah, because he's he lacks intelligence because he made a mistake. So I hate
that. The thing. I guess we're all you and I don't speak like that, but that's the thing. Like even when we make comments on coaches or players or whatever, we're speaking to their performance, not about them as people. Right. Like we're not
no, that is true. But at least when we analyze people, we do analyze it, for sometimes the short term and the long term, but we differentiate. And, we also just, mostly like, I don't think it's like, I don't feel bad for saying a guy had a bad game, because we all have bad days, I mean, a store clerk has a bad day. So
I just want to but you players appreciate for what you do, Tom. Coaches and fans love that. Good example. Lindgren reminds me of how you played. I take that as a huge compliment. I think we said this during the season, or I know I said this during the season. My concern with Lindgren was that he just wasn't big enough. He's got a huge heart. I love the way he plays. Yes, I'd like to think he plays the way I played. But you know what? He really, he sold me that size doesn't matter with him. He goes out and plays. And again, it's not that I didn't believe in him before. I just was concerned, okay, is he big enough to play the way he wanted to play? Apparently, he'd hurt his ankle the last game of the regular season. They had a press conference last couple of days, and he disclosed that. And he talked about how, it was like it was a high ankle sprain or what it was, but he fought through it. And he was, I tell you, he made a big difference in the team when he came back in the Pittsburgh series. And you could see the team really rallied about the fact that he came back to play and how badly he was hurt. So, no, he's good.
Well, speaking of that defense, though, I do think that Gerard Gallant will be on the spot next year just because, defensively, he has to clean that up. It's there's a lot of talent back there, but, and I mentioned it the last show, just in terms of the advanced statistics saying no team in the playoffs gave up more dangerous scoring chances. And I ran my theory by general manager about, the idea of that, do you play like that because you've got Shesterkin? He goes, well, you kind of do. He said that Buffalo kind of did, but, you got to be better than that. He said there was just way too many chances that they gave up.
I just wonder, do they have the personnel to do that, though?
Lindgren certainly plays that style. I think Fox can be a very good defensive player when he.
I just mean as a team, like it's a group of 5 players out on the ice, or the forwards and defense. Well, my theory, it's not just the defensemen that make good.
Well, one of my longtime viewers asked me that, you don't like the wide open style of the Maple Leafs, or do you? That's what he said, and yet you love the Rangers, so.
Right. Well, I don't see.
He thought the Rangers played a lot like the Maple Leafs in the postseason. So
I don't know if the Rangers were as good offensively. I think they were opportunistic. They had a good power play. I think Toronto is a better 5-on-5 team offensively. I think
that's fair.
Either way, the Rangers found a way to win. I just look at the Rangers, and what I like about them is they found a way to win in games all the time, right throughout the entire season. Some of it was just Shesterkin playing fantastic. Other was big goals at big times for key players and other players. I thought Panarin didn't play as well. I didn't ever hear if Panarin was hurt or not. He clearly didn't have a great playoff. I'm assuming there's something wrong with him. But if he could have been a guy that made a difference. And the way he played during the regular season, he did make a difference, especially on the power play, but even at 5-on-5.
Yeah, and that I would argue that probably wasn't Gerard Gallant's style. It was more of he let the players, play that way and take chances. So
that's the team he's got. That's
right.
The thing with Gallant, the way he coaches the team. Okay, this is the team I've got. It isn't the Gerard Gallant style. It's the style of team that we have, and letting that team play to their style. That's why I liked him as a player, as a coach, I should say, in that I thought I saw that in Vegas too, and I thought they did really well with it. He would say to the guys, "Listen, don't worry about mistakes. If you're going out and working hard, do what you have to do to play." So.
Yeah. Speaking of that too, I was surprised to read players standing up for Cassidy, and I guess are they just being mice? Not mice. Are they just trying to be nice people? And
not many players. Yeah, not many players badmouth a coach on the way out the door, right?
Yeah. But I was surprised that nobody said, he was hard on. They disputed that. So especially some of the guys that are still there. So
yeah. And did we talk about this? That he was actually asked directly about Bergeron. Cassidy was, and the quote was that he would have him on any team that he's coaching. And of course, he's going to say that too. Cassidy was asked in a press conference about Bergeron. Because again, the rumor that was started here first, not. Elliot Friedman, it was started here first, was the problem between Cassidy and Bergeron.
Well, you didn't start the rumor. You got it from a source. Yeah, let's be clear on that. He's saying that he got it from a source. So,
But that was the source was. I think we started the rumor right here on the show, Kevin. I didn't say.
I hope that's not true. No, that's what I'm saying. You got information from a source that you reported first on this show. You did not start a rumor. A guy who starts a rumor is sitting around in a bar mentioning, saying something that gets, passed around with no basis for fact. You didn't start a rumor. You reported information you received.
You're correct.
Yeah. But it was here on this first that nobody else had said it. But I mean, I have no idea how Bergeron feels about Cassidy, but players, Tom can verify this. Players sometimes don't like coaches, and sometimes they do. And there's always somebody on the team that doesn't like the coach.
Totally. Yeah. And I'm sure Bergeron's been there his whole career. There's a culture that's been built there in Boston, a way to treat players, whatever that culture is. I don't know. I'm not in that locker room. But it just, from what I'm hearing, it appears that it wasn't, Cassidy wasn't doing what the Boston culture had been. And then you wonder, did DeBrusk ask for a trade because Cassidy was all over him all the time? Was that part of the reason? I don't know the answer to that. That's some of the stuff that they've contemplated. So,
yeah, well, that could be interesting to see what they end up doing with DeBrusk now. So, because I think they need DeBrusk. I mean, not that he's, a difference maker, but especially starting the year when they're going to have, 3 or 4 players that, won't be ready until December.
And watching him play in that Carolina series with Boston, I thought he played really well. Like after all that stuff, he asked him to trade, he came back and played well.
Yeah.
So real quick, I know we're getting over time here, but really quick, Susan asked a question here. We got to get to Susan. Who to keep? Cop, Stone, Vetrano, Mate. Who for me, you'd re-sign Vetrano. I liked him. I'm not. And we talked about this before with Strome. Like, I don't believe he's a number 2 centerman, right?
Yeah. Oh, I think they'll sign Cop. The problem with Vetrano, why he hasn't been able to stick, is he wants to be paid like a goal scorer. Right. And the coaches, I mean, everyone likes him. Everyone likes him. He's a contributor, but they don't want to pay him, big scorers money. They want to pay him like a third liner. So. Right. And that's an issue.
If he was smart, the role that played him in this year, if he gets that same role next year, he'd be smart to sign a short-term contract, go out and do it again for another year or two, and then I don't know how old he is. That's pushing it back too far.
But he's he's scored everywhere he's been. It's not like he has to prove he can score. I mean, he's a scorer. Like he's an energy scorer.
I think it's great too.
So it's just a matter of what but maybe he really enjoyed it here and wants to, feels like this is a good fit for him. So, who knows? But I'd certainly want him to keep him if you can. Sure.
He did add a lot to the lineup there. He has some games where he just really made a difference. Yeah, he's good.
Yeah, I like him. I got to think it's time for Strome to move on. But we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, and it's weird because I like him, and so to say you'd want to get rid of him. But he'd have to sign thinking he's going to be a third-line center. To me, if they're going to make another run and try to win a Stanley Cup, he can't be your number 2 center. I don't think.
Yeah, and what's their cap situation here? I'm trying to get
pretty tight against the cap now, right?
Yeah, I mean they certainly have, but they had some room before. So let's see where they are. But they have other contracts, I think, that are.
Yeah, I remember going into the trade deadline, we were talking that they had $12 million in cap space, but then they signed Barclay Goodrow and so.
Yeah, and as you're looking forward, it's kind of like the old, I can't remember who it was, but a former player once said, the problem with scoring 35 goals is they expect you to do it every year. Like you can't expect Kreider to have that kind of year that he had this year when absolutely everything went right.
Bad year. If he gets 35 goals, it's not going to be a bad year. It's just not going to be the outstanding year he had last year, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And you got to remember in the Rangers lineup, Sammy Blais will be back in the lineup too. So that's another player that that's a top. I guess you call him top 9. I don't think he's a 4th-line player. I think he's a 3rd-line player, but.
Yeah, they've got 14 players signed, and they only have $13 million left. So they've got basically 9 players to sign with $13 million, and Cop's going to take some of that money. So if they re-sign him, and I would think Mott you could fit in too if you wanted him.
Yep.
So But
And for Vetrano, from what you're saying, then does he think he's a $5 or $6 million a year player, Vetrano?
I think he thinks he's at least a $5 million player, but we'll see. So let's see. I'm looking at Vetrano's salary history. So,
Update here. I stand corrected, Susan. Thank you. Blay is not signed for next year. I didn't realize that.
Okay. So, yeah, he was at 2.5 last year. So, what do we got there? So, boy, I mean, you're right when you said they were up against it in the salary cap.
Scored 2 goals one year, and they expected him to score 3. No, that never happened. They never expected him to score 3 goals. We can dispute that one.
Yeah. And Tom tells that story well of when Tom ended up with the puck. Harry Brooks told everyone to think, a mistake's been made here. So
Tom's not supposed to have it. Give it to somebody else.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, we appreciate everyone for tuning in. We'll be back on Wednesday to at least talk a little bit hockey about what's happening. And by then, we'll be starting to talk about the actual what's actually Monday. We'll be back. So we'll actually have how many games and then at least 2.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, and again, remember, if you've got rabbits and you see a UFO coming around, make sure you get the rabbits indoors, okay?
Yeah, exactly. All right, thanks for joining us, everyone.
Again, if you want to listen to the radio version of this show, you can go to radio.co at 365 Sports. Where can everybody see you, Kev? See your writing?
Yeah, DetroitHockeyNow.com and also HockeyBuzz.com.
All right. See everybody on Monday.